Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the January 22nd meeting of the Board of Selectmen, the first of our two-night marathon that we've got going starting tonight. For the purposes of managing the agenda over the next two nights, tonight we're going to focus only on police-related issues and water-related issues. There'll be no public comments on other topics. That'll all come tomorrow night. And for those of you that want to speak to issues related to the police facility and water, your time will come. So here we go. Basically, first of all, I want to, on the police issue, Ashley Seabold's here, Annie Beck's here. Who else is here for the committee? Jim Casey. Hi, Jim. Where you been? How's you? Not New Orleans tonight. Okay, that's good. I want to again thank you all for what you've been doing for the past year. It's been phenomenal, and it's led right into where we are now. And hopefully, we're now here to maintain the momentum tonight and get some financing lined up and so on. So, what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to propose that the Selectmen place two articles on the warrant for the town meeting, seeking funding for the next three steps in the process to develop a new police facility. First step of that is to acquire the Garvey site, including related acquisition costs. The second step in that is to do some preliminary site work, including borings and geological logistics. And the third step in that is to do some design development. And we'll talk about financing those in just a minute. As far as the actual warrant articles are concerned, I'm proposing two, and you're going to continue to hear me say aye, because Janet and Bibi and I have not talked about this. Kim and I have talked about it extensively. Steve Thoreau, the town treasurer, is here, and he and I have talked about it extensively. But this will be a discussion, first of all, among the three of us, because we have not had the opportunity, as you know, to talk about this. I'm going to propose that we have a warrant article for $400,000 to acquire the property and to do the additional site work that'll have to be done in terms of surveying and so on to carve the piece of land out. So let's stop there and ask Kim just to bring us up to date on where we are on the site acquisition itself.
And you mean the purchase and sale agreement?
Yeah.
Okay, so we are working on the purchase and sale agreement. The Garveys have given us three conditions, four if you count the sale price of $350,000. They also require that the entrance to the police station would be a public way. And the reason for this is so that if and when the land behind it is developed, that would be the entrance into that, whatever it's developed as. The piece of property that the town requires for this project is the section that is the flattest. It would be the section that they would have used for the entrance road. So if the town's going to have that property, the entrance would need to be up to the limit of the property, up to the property line. Obviously, the developer, whoever develops it in the back, would put in whatever road that they wanted to put in. So that's one. The question that we're working on now is, when would this access road have to be built? Would it have to be built when we start the project, or would it be built when and if the backland is ever developed? So we're working on that piece. Outdoor lighting, they want any outdoor lighting to follow the dark skies lighting program. As you know, there's been discussion of that most recently at the planning board in relation to Kelsey Fields. So it's something that's important to the Garveys. And I think probably to everybody in that neighborhood would appreciate that. The third condition is the right to repurchase. If the town decides not to use this property and decides to sell it, they want the first right to purchase the property back at the $350,000 purchase price for a period of 15 years. So the town would first go to them for that. And finally, obviously, the purchase price is $350,000. So the attorney has done a draft of this. We need a few tweaks, and then we'll go to the Garveys and hopefully get it signed. So assuming those conditions are okay with the board, we'll work on those final details, and we'll be all set.
So do either one of you have any questions about that? I think you've seen the drafts, but it's in process, and there's no reason to believe there's any particular issue. I think it's good to get the road issue and the lighting issue well documented right from the beginning.
I just have a stupid question, and you could probably answer this. I forget how the dark skies lighting works. It's
Down.
okay. Got it.
Not at the top of
Yeah. It's,
Cast the light down.
okay, got it, all right.
Anything else? Okay, before I go any further, anybody want to comment on the site status? Okay, we'll move on from that then. Now, back, so I started to say before Kim spoke, 400,000, you say, why 350 versus 400? We don't know exactly what it's going to cost to get the subdivision surveyed and so on. So at the suggestion of our colleagues at Colliers, we've put $50,000 in for that type of work, along with the lawyers that are drafting the agreement and so on. That is nothing but a placeholder for professional services relating to the site issue. So one warrant article for $400,000, a second warrant article for $555,000 to fund the site and design work that I will talk about a little bit more here in a minute. So why two articles, you were going to ask? The reason is that I would suggest that for the $400,000 part of this, that we use the capacity of the fund balance to buy the land. And why do that? Because the flow of funds in and out will make it easy when we're ready to sign the purchase and sale agreement to be able to have the funds readily available. Steve can comment on the ability of the cash to do that sometime perhaps in June or July. And likewise, on the other end of it, if we ever had to sell the property back to the Garveys have it sell it back to the town, it would make it easy just to put the money into the general fund and not have to worry about how we deal with a bond issue that we don't have, can't make accelerated payments on, and so on. Obviously, putting $400,000, using $400,000 from the fund balance also minimizes the use of our debt capacity and reduces the amount of debt service that would be in the operating budget for the years outstanding. I anticipate that somebody will ask the question, one of you might ask the question about, well, what happens to the fund balance here? And that's obviously an open question. It's something we don't know the answer to each year until October, late October, early November, when the DRA gives us the numbers and we take a look at it. We don't know how many funds will be left over from this year's operations that will flow into that, and so on and so forth. So it's an open question, clearly, and it's a balancing question from the pros of doing it, in my mind, to the question about whether you want to give up any of the flexibility that exists by having just all of the fund balance there and available. We've talked about that over the years. Janet and I are probably tired of talking about it. You will after 5 or 6 more years, BB, and so on. But it's a balancing act. But it seems to me that it's a good way to minimize the amount of debt we use and to maximize the ability for cash flow to work easily for the land purchase part of this. As far now as the site work is concerned, you know from the work that Colliers gave us, and we talked about the Police Advisory Committee meeting last Friday on the 17th. There are two aspects to that. One is clearing the land enough to do borings, and the second is to actually do borings and some geological work. That seems to me to be obvious things that we have to do at this point before we can complete any preliminary design work, because we need to know if there are going to be any restrictions due to the layout of the land and so on. And as was discussed at the Police Advisory Committee by at least one of the members last Friday, there's some questions about maybe we should dig deeper or wider or avoid this swale or that swale and so on. So that $75,000, I mean $125,000 for those two items seems like a logical thing that is part of the long-term financing of this project. And then the second part is $400,000 for initial design development and cost estimating and a little bit of contingency for that. Again, we won't know what those numbers are until the advisory committee makes a choice of professional services to do those things and so on. But again, I think Colliers has been pretty reliable in terms of giving us estimated numbers for these types of services. So that, I think if you add those numbers up, the 170, the 125, the 400, and the 30 for estimating, that you get to 555. So there we have those two numbers that add up to $955,000. That is short of the $1.1 million that Colliers mentioned at the meeting on Friday, because it's my feeling that for this part of the project, we don't need the services of a owner's representative. These are fairly straightforward professional service arrangements, and to the extent that that you all feel as time goes on that you need a little bit of third-party help, that's why we have a Selectmen's discretionary fund. And I would think that you don't want to try to bond services that you don't know you need, and again, eat up debt capacity for something that probably isn't needed for this next stage of the project. When we get to the further stages, obviously we'll be back wanting to have those services. But I think to the extent you need a small amount of third-party intervention or something, that's something you can easily do out of just your normal operating monies. So I will stop there and see what questions, thoughts you have and so on. There's sort of, I think, one is the two warrant article thing, and the second is the actual purposes. And then Kim can tell us, just remind us that the way the article will read is to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of, fill that in, and further authorize in the case of the bond, the issuance of bonds, terms and conditions to be determined, or in the case of using the fund balance, to utilize the fund balance. We've done that for other things. You may recall we did that when we first set up the waste reduction committee. We used fund balance for that as an example, and we've used it for other purposes in the past. But I'm just reading the language here in case somebody wants to know how does an article read. We don't say in the articles exactly what kind of debt we're going to use, exactly what the term is, where we're going to get the money, and so on. We just say to raise and appropriate that amount of money and to give the selectmen's discretion on the rest of it. Okay. So, Bibi, you're nodding, so you want to...
Yep, I think two great ideas. I think it's good creative thinking. Appreciate the fact that it will be less debt that will be on the town by $400,000. I guess I'd just like to hear Steve at some point talk about the balance of that general fund account and how it might affect us in the fall when we're going to set the tax rate, if we will still have enough of a cushion. Other than that, I think I agree with what you're saying. I think it's a good way to move forward.
You got to be argumentative. We got an hour to go here. Got to give Lee something to write about.
Yeah.
Janet?
No, obviously, I've thought about it, and as you have, Bill, we're crafting this approach, and I think it's a sound way to approach financing for this project. It is unfortunate, as someone said to me recently, that knowing for the last 20 years that we needed to do something about a new police facility, that we didn't start setting money aside. And I agree with that. So we can't go back. So I think we just need to hopefully move forward. So thank you, Bill, for coming up.
Jim, do you have anything you want to add to that? Steve, do you want to comment on that proposal? Sure. You need, yeah, you know the drill.
So the fund balance is a,
For the recording, you need to introduce yourself.
oh, I'm sorry, I'm Steve Thoreau, a resident and treasurer of the town. The fund balance is a combination of unanticipated revenues and underfunding of expenses coming into the town, and at the end of the fiscal year, it adds up to, over the last several years, a surplus. The usual and customary practice for the board has been to use some of that surplus to moderate tax increases. So last year we used 600,000, year before 4. So we've been able to generate surpluses in the neighborhood of $500,000 to $800,000 over the last several years. So as a result of that, the fund balance now stands at $1,880,000 after we made the $612,000 withdrawal. So it's $1,880,000. Now, what does that mean? The Department of Revenue Administration requires, well, gives us guidance as to what the size of the unfunded, undesignated fund balance should be. And they put forth a range of 5% to 17% of general expenses to remain in that fund at all times. We've been able to manage the fund at between 10 and 12, 13% historically. So if we were to start with 1.8, right now it's 11.7% of total expenses. If we were to use 400,000, that would bring the balance down to 1,480,000, but that wouldn't occur until the end of this fiscal year. We will probably generate another surplus in the neighborhood of 400,000 to 500,000. So what we're going to be generating is going to negate the use of those funds. I think the real question for us to use the fund balance to offset the cost of the debt, because usually and customary practice has been for the board to use $400,000 or so to mitigate the rise of taxes. And so I think if we use 400,000 for this purpose, it's going to question if we can use another 400,000 as we enter next year. Bringing the balance down to 1.3, 1.4 will probably give us a 8% number as a percentage of total expenses. It's well above the 5% guidance. But just as a point of caution, it will provoke questioning about the use of next year's surplus. But right now, we have more than enough cash flow to cover the $400,000 expense, and we have more than enough undesignated fund balance to cover the debt. Yeah, so.
And Steve, do you see any issues with trying to raise $555,000 in the debt markets?
Of debt, no. The only question there, if we want to eliminate prepayment penalties, have the flexibility of perhaps rolling it into more debt, paying it off sooner than contractually obligated, I would suggest that we maybe stay local, put it out to bid to local banks in lieu of the bond bank, which would provide more flexibility. So if we come to that point, that's what I would suggest doing.
Good, thank you. And I should have mentioned that by keeping the amounts relatively small, the local banks might be willing to play ball with this. When we get to the water topic later on, I see the
Well,
water
well-
commissioners behind us, and they've struggled with the availability of credit from the local banks, so.
Local banks are always willing and able and anxious and would love to lend money to this town. But right now, interest rates have ticked up, they haven't come down. And so going to a local bank to get the flexibility of a prepayment penalty removed in lieu of the bond bank will probably cost us 100 basis points more. But that's, rough and dirty at this point.
Good, thank you. That's what I just wanted you to say that. Thank you. Okay, I will now open the floor to commentary. Ashley.
Ashley Siebold, resident and chair of the Police Facilities Advisory Committee. I have a question on timing. Our fiscal year runs July 1st through June 30th, correct? So if we're in FY '25 now, we're in FY '25. When would this 400,000 be spent in FY '26?
That depends on when the purchase and sale agreement
Okay.
is okay. If we use the fund balance, the fiscal year makes
No
no
difference.
Makes no
Okay.
difference. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, we're going to get to that Chinese food early. Any other questions, comments on this proposal, this plan? If we hear none, the next step will be to take this to the Budget Committee. I see a couple of Budget Committee members here this evening. At their budget hearing on February 5th, they will opine on whether they support the expenditure of the money and how we're going to go about raising it. So there will be, on the warrant, there will be listed, Selectmen approve this, hopefully 3-0. Budget Committee recommends this, whatever number that they come up with. Then after that, it will appear in the warrant and will become the subject of the first couple of articles discussed at town meeting on March 12th. Peter.
Peter Nichols, resident of New London. I just have a quick question about the double jeopardy. When articles are put forward in the warrant, the votes are taken either yes or no for a particular warrant. Is there a double jeopardy or a concern that one might be approved and the other might not, either by misinformation or the way the voters felt? Could that occur, and if it does, how do you deal with it? Thanks.
Kim, you want to?
It certainly could happen. I think if the town meeting decides to purchase the property and then decides not to spend any more money, then the town would purchase the property and sit on it until such time as the voters decided to appropriate money to do some more investigation. I think if they turn down the property, there would be little reason to discuss doing any work on the property because the town wouldn't own it. So if it's a no for the purchase, I think the next one becomes moot and probably just pass over it.
I should just add that I think this is a great approach, and I wasn't being critical, but just trying to understand the situation. I endorse this creative approach to financing. It is expensive. It's too bad we didn't do it a long time ago, but we all have regrets about things we didn't do, and we are where we are. So carry on. Thank you.
Okay.
Ashley Siebold again. Two things. One is, I think as I'm sitting next to Annie and Jim, we are also worried about the double jeopardy here of having two separate warrant articles. Annie and I were just briefly chatting. We're going to have to do a pretty clear strategic marketing campaign here on what those both mean. Is there no way to combine into one?
The way to combine them into one is to ask for the money to come all from one source.
Okay. Okay.
The problem with that is that if there's a strong view on the site, part of the thing,
Sure.
it might dominate the rest of the discussion.
Yep.
It's a judgment call as to how whether you split
Yeah.
something up or try or ask for a big lump sum. I think my inclination is guided by the fact that we've had a lot of discussion about buying land in this town, and we need to get over the hump of, are we finally ready after umpteen years to buy a piece of land?
Yep. Yep. Okay. I think
But it's certainly,
yeah.
you could keep working on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we just need to be very crystal clear and talk about it in a way that everyone can understand, regardless of their knowledge of how town finances
I mean,
work.
what we're trying to do is to maintain the momentum we now have, and for years, people have said, well, we can't talk about a site yet because you haven't told us what you're gonna do on it.
Now we've got-
told people what we're gonna do on it, and we wanna get the site, we wanna now do some of the design work, but we're not gonna ask for all the money yet, because we still also have to design it to fit the amount of money we have.
Yeah.
We had that discussion last Friday, so we're going to, part of the design work is to get within a reasonable budget. so.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
I was just going to say that I
To
appreciate.
Tom, do you want to speak? Yeah, okay.
But one second before you speak, Tom, I just wanted to say that I appreciated that conversation last week of, what is the amount that we want to pay, and what the policy is for borrowing money for the town, so that I think when we're presenting this at the town meeting, the voters will have that number in their head, that this will likely be the total number, and we're going to work very hard over this next year to get it to that total number. Sorry. Go.
Tom,
Bill, just
please introduce yourself.
Tom Carley, New London resident. Just to clarify, you said that if we sell the property back to the Garveys, any proceeds go back to the operating budget? Is that correct?
Go into the general fund.
Okay. Why wouldn't you set up a trust account and use the proceeds to pay off the debt? Because the debt's still going to be hanging out there, and there's going to be no constraints on using that money for debt service.
If we don't acquire the land, it seems unlikely, as Kim said, that we would then proceed to ask for the money to do the next round of work. We wouldn't ask for the design work if we don't have the land, so there would be no debt.
But if you buy the land, you float the debt.
No,
and-
buy the land with the cash flow that Steve talked about, the fund balance.
And what's the bond issuance for?
Bond issue is the second stage of this, and that's for the actual work to then design what's going to go on the land. And the first two stages of that are doing boring work and geological survey work to make sure that we understand what we can do in terms of depth, width, height, and so on the land. And then second of all, to do the preliminary design work that will take all of the big block diagrams that have been done and turn them into actual designs that fit on that, on the piece of the land that we've found what the depths are. For example, last Friday, one of the members of the committee suggested that we dig deeper and make more of a basement level in it, and that we need to know whether we can do that or not. And then if we're going to do that, design the interior part to fit that design as opposed to the block diagram that currently shows a smaller basement. But first of all, we have to have the land, because the town has made it really clear that we're not going to spend any money on doing things for a police facility when we don't have a site in hand.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Charlie, yeah.
Charlie Kelsey, resident of town and budget committee member. My question is, it reasonable to think about the second warrant article being contingent on site study being completed that then determines what the restrictions of the actual footprint of the building and related design and construction costs would be?
Well, the second article, Charlie, is to do the work to determine what those constraints might be.
But I thought the first article, the core borings and determination of ledge and water and those kinds of things that would impact the cost of building is determined at that stage.
So, we're talking about two different twos. One division is fund balance money for the site,
Understood.
debt for the other. Then when we get into the debt, there'll be several stages there, and you'll only spend the second part of that money if the first part points you in that direction.
I guess where I'm going, I understand the 125 in that portion of the 555,000 balance is for some of this engineering analysis. I'm just concerned about getting boxed if we find something on the site that drives the design construction costs high and then compromise the facility that you ultimately end up building.
But I would expect if that happened, I'm not going to be sitting here, but I would expect the Police Advisory Committee will come to the selectmen and say, you know, we found some things that we didn't expect to find. We need to take a pause.
So that would mean spending, instead of spending the full bonded 555,000, you could phase it and pause it and reverse to a different site because the conditions found were such that it would drive the construction cost to an unrealistic level and compromise the building. That
If I were sitting here at that stage, I'd go to the town treasurer and say, you know, can we get another 100, before we start the borrowing, do we have enough cash flow before the debt, or can we do some anticipation notes with the local bank or whatever? I wouldn't go out and borrow $555,000. I'd start spending $125,000 and stop if I have to stop.
So that explanation is very helpful, and I don't know that gets contained or put into a warrant, but it is part of the dialogue that I think possibly as you think about marketing and the citizenry understanding these phases and the financial obligations will help ease some of those concerns.
Great, thank you. That will be very helpful. Unfortunately, the construct of the article is very legalistic. Will the town vote to appropriate a certain amount of money? Then it leaves to the selectmen the option of how to get that money. But it says by raising it in some form of debt.
Thank you.
But I hope you would have enough confidence in the select board that they wouldn't just go out and spend the money for the sake of doing it.
I think there's a presumption of how the financing works by the citizens, that if they are educated and it's explained both the what, the how, and the why, it helps ease the apprehensions that are created by borrowing significant amounts of money.
Thank you. And I'm looking at Annie and Jim and Ashley, and they're nodding, so okay, they're on this. John,
John Ellis, resident of New London. And Kim, maybe you could help with this. You mentioned the access road. Is the cost of that access road going to be included in that 400,000, or is that an additional expense that would be incurred in the 550?
Of the 400,000, 350,000 will be for the purchase of the land.
Yep.
The other 50,000 will be for subdivision and those kinds of things. There will be no road building or building of the police department until some point where the town voters appropriate the money for the police station. So no road will be built until there's an approval for the police station.
Can you explain the repurchased land of the 350,000 you mentioned over the Garveys over 15 years? So if the value of that land were to be sold at, let's say, 700,000, we would sell it back to them for 350,000?
That's correct.
Thank you.
BB?
They want a right to repurchase it, they're not definitely, they want the first right of refusal.
Correct.
Okay.
Anybody else hiding back there? Okay, so I then would entertain a motion to ask Kim and town council to draft these two warrant articles so they can be presented to the Budget Committee on the 5th of March as drafts.
Second.
So moved. All right.
Oh,
Yeah.
so moved and seconded, sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So the last item under the, it's not the way the agenda is constructed here, but the last item under the police topic tonight, oh, sorry.
You said 5th of March, and
What?
you just said 5th of March, not the 5th of...
5th of February, sorry. Thank you, Rip. I need all the help I can get these days. The other item that related to police tonight is, BB, do you want to just comment briefly on where we stand, where you think we should proceed with the question of doing some more work on dispatch?
Yes.
Because obviously, in the long run, when we get to questions of design and so on, this will come back up.
Yes. Yes, so recently, Chief Cobb, Kim, and I met with Colin Beasley, and Colin came to us with the suggestion that the town conduct a study on the dispatch. Colin's position, and Colin, I'm using your name, so please feel free to speak after I'm done if I'm, misrepresenting anything here. Colin's position is New London could save money by closing its dispatching center and instead join a larger dispatching center. This would mean that dispatching would be performed by non-New London employees, something that's never been done in New London. As most of you know, the last time we had a study done of the dispatch, it was 10 years ago in 2014, and at that time, that study was done to make the decision on whether to make improvements because it was pretty old technology and the consoles needed to be replaced and all of that. At the time then, following that study, the decision was made to keep dispatch as it was, and significant resources have been committed to the dispatching center, including the upgrading of the repeaters on Mount Kearsarge and Mount Sunapee, new computer system, and improvements to the dispatching center, including consoles and more space. Much of those cost improvements were completed with grant money that Chief Cobb and former Chief Anderson were awarded. So, Chief Cobb has expressed her disagreement in doing a new study. She's concerned about the negative impact that it might have on current staffing. If they get worried that the town is studying again whether to have the dispatch center. But it's extremely hard to find these qualified people to serve in this critical role. And it might make it a little harder if people think that New London is considering getting rid of their dispatch center. Chief Cobb also points out that the dispatching center is in the best condition it has ever been, and thanks to all the grant-funded improvements. But given these important considerations, I feel strongly the decision of whether to conduct a study as necessary should be taken up by the board for consideration in fiscal year 2026. We'll be hiring a new town administrator in June. That person should have an opportunity to get up to speed on this topic and to actively participate in the study. And we will also have a new select board member because Bill has decided not to run again. So I think it's really important for those new folks to be involved in the decision on whether to do a study in dispatch. And I think we would still have time in the whole design process of the new police station to be able to do that study in fiscal year 2026. So that is my recommendation, and that's that.
Since I won't be here, since I will be sitting on that side of the podium, Jen, how's that sit with you?
You summarized very well. And I think it's important to note Chief Cobb's reservations about this, although I do think it is a good idea, considering we are going to be building a new building,
Yeah.
and will we include dispatch in that building or not? So
Yep.
that's one of the considerations.
Colin, your name was called out. Do you want to speak? I see you standing.
Colin Beasley, resident. Yes, thank you. I want to put a couple of
Yeah.
editorials on it.
Please do.
I think it's very important when we communicate anything about the dispatch center with the community that we represent, and I said this at the meeting.
Yep.
Like thousands of police stations across the country, not having a dispatch does not mean you don't have a phone connection to the police station. There's a lot of folks who believe if you get rid of dispatch, you get rid of 526-2626. I am not saying that. A big part of the study, in my mind, should be, just to put context in it, untangle what's going on in that organization. There's a lot of activity going there that's emergency dispatch, and there's a lot of activity that has nothing to do with emergency dispatch. It's all collected together. The cost structure behind that, those various things are different. And I think it's important because the dispatch function, in the last 10 years, its cost has gone up 87%. Compare that to the rest of the town, it's 30% higher than the rest of the town over the last 10 years. So the dispatch function's operating costs, and that puts aside any capital investments, by the way. The operating cost is at a scale and scope that's exceeding the town's cost structure. So we should just evaluate what's going on and try to understand whether or not we can disentangle what's dispatched for emergency versus non-emergency and determine what the cost structure of the town would be. This function, one of the things I talked about, is heading towards $1 million organization, which is 10% of the current budget. And I believe that if you did some benchmarking against other towns, it will become obvious to those who are now sharing our cost that it might be worthwhile not sharing those costs because they're going to continue to go up. So the town is going to be faced with $1 million budget. And I just think that we should better understand that. If the decision after that study is to stay with it, fine, but we're doing that with our eyes open. And what we don't recover is a lot of capital investments. So if we decide to build a new police station with 1,100 square feet of dispatch, that's a big investment. And none of that gets recovered from the participating towns. We bear all that ourselves. So thinking about the budget, thinking about the tax consequences, I just thought it was worthwhile doing the study. So I just want to provide that context.
Thank you. Thanks,
Th-
Colin.
thanks,
for
Colin.
all
Yep.
the time you spend on this. Appreciate it.
And thank you, Bibi, for sitting down with Colin and Chief and so on and coming up with a proposal to work on this in the coming months. Okay, I'm now ready to move on from anything related to police, unless somebody wants to say. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, gone with police. Next topic, water. As most of you understand through various comments that have been made, there is a confidential mediation process continuing between Twin Pines and the water precinct, but in the matter of transparency, there's been some development in outside of those talks that I just want to share with you all tonight. I'm the town's representative in those discussions, but specifically, I have a deadline of noon tomorrow to return any comments back to the to a group that met on the 13th, and so I want to make sure that anybody who has any comments, I can hear them and send that information back. I'm delighted to see that 2 of the water commissioners are here tonight, so they can be sure that whatever I say is accurate with what they understand is currently going on. So following the meeting on the 13th of January, all of the parties involved in the mediation met with the Department of Environmental Services in Concord. There were 18 of us in the room. It was not subject to the confidentiality provisions of the mediation because a number of the people who were there were not subject to those disclosure restrictions. What I wrote at the time after when I came home from that meeting was that the heart of most of the discussion revolved around the idea of Twin Pines sponsoring a study by an organization called Envicor of water conservation at Colby Sawyer that would result in conservation of up to 1.5 million gallons of water a year, an amount more than adequate that could be replaced in the New London Springfield water precinct system by water usage at Long Meadow Commons, the Twin Pines project. Issues of seasonality, current precinct daily capacity, certainty of achieving the projected savings, and accurate Long Meadow Common demand projections were explored. At the end of that meeting, the convener of the meeting gathered everybody together, and it was agreed that Twin Pines and the Water Precinct would review several documents that were provided regarding the Envicor system and work that they would do, and that pursuant to this understanding reached on January 13th, and subsequent confirmation by Twin Pines and the Water Precinct. I'm reading now from the convener's notes. The next step is for the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, the Water Precinct, and Twin Pines to review the documents, obtain input from their staff experts or outside technical consultants if they wish, and provide any written feedback on the methodology as soon as possible to the other parties. As soon as possible turns out to be noon tomorrow. So each party is now reviewing and conducting its review of the proposed methodology, and we will give our input back if we have any at noon tomorrow, and at 1 o'clock on Friday, the mediation group will reconvene and determine whether there's been anything new learned from this intervention with the Department of Environmental Services. So that's what's going on. There's still a confidential mediation process in place. There was this public, non-confidential meeting on January 13th. I was in attendance there. Two water commissioners that are here tonight were there also, along with 15 of our closest friends. That meeting was not recorded. It was all done informally, but I've read you the conclusion that the attorney who conducted the meeting or called the meeting put down. Ken or Rip, would you add anything to that? Have I said anything that I shouldn't have said, or anything more you would add? I'm sure you will put your comments in by noon tomorrow. And what I'm looking to see if there's any comments from the town of New London to be added to those of yours, you and Twin Pines. That's all I can tell you. But you should have the opportunity to know. I don't want noon tomorrow to pass and have somebody say down the road, we never knew about that. Nobody gave us a chance to speak up. So, Peter.
Peter Nichols, resident. I guess just as an observation, we're all hoping that if the amount of water that could be conserved from the good work of the college is sufficient, that would be adequate for the Twin project to proceed. And I won't ask the question if that's something we can assume, but I'll just offer that we are hoping that's the case and comes out of this negotiation. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Yep. Karen.
Karen Epstein, resident. So I guess I'm kind of caught off guard by this, so I'm not coming here with any information other than a question. So this mediation that you were speaking about is, I guess what I just heard, is the ability to meet the increased demand that would be potentially forthcoming from a approval of the Twin Pines project would be met through conservation, through a conservation commitment by Colby Sawyer? Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm unable to comment on what's going on in the mediation. What I can say is that the parties in the mediation agreed it would be useful to meet with the Department of Environmental Services.
So I guess I'm confused then, as a person in the public being asked to kind of weigh in on this. How do I weigh in on something I don't have the facts about, and I can't gauge the implication?
That's the tricky line that I'm walking tonight between transparency, to let you know that one of your selectmen participated in a meeting on January 13th, and to tell you briefly what that was about, and to tell you that As a result of that meeting, I have an opportunity to make comments from the town of New London back into the discussion by noon tomorrow. And I assume that the Water Precinct and Twin Pines and the Cleveland Company, all of whom were there, and the various sundry lawyers will all do that. But that's all I know. I could have erred on the other side and let this go by, and someday in the future you might have heard something about it. But I was at a meeting that was not confidential, and I'm telling you I was there, and I'm telling you what happened at the meeting.
Okay, I'm not being
So
critical of
there's
that.
no-
I'm just
no
trying to-
questions?
No, I'm just trying to
You
understand.
shouldn't be surprised or so on. I wasn't looking particularly for questions, but just want you to know this is going on and that the parties in the mediation all gathered together and spent a couple of hours together
No, I'm,
talking about this particular proposal from Twin Pines to see if conserving water at one of the largest users in town would create enough additional capacity that the Water Precinct would then feel that it could be used to be replaced in the system and be used at Long Meadow.
got it. So thank you for that.
I'm just reading my notes carefully here.
No, I understand, and I just want to get a better understanding of the framework in which I'm trying to respond, because I don't want your offering of comment to go unresponded to. So I guess what comes to mind when we're speaking about conservation or a commitment to conservation is that's kind of the unknown. And people can have the best of intentions with regarding to conservation, and all sorts of unanticipated things can happen. So just as a matter of experience in life, you can certainly plan on something working out, and you can have the best intentions with regard to conservation, but in fact, the concern I would have if those intentions were clear and articulated, but in fact, circumstances get in the way of that would be a concern of mine, and that's, I don't think, is something that is an unreasonable perspective, that we've heard the best of intentions and sometimes they just don't work out. So I just would respond in that way.
That's
Thank
a
you.
useful comment. Thank you. As I said, in the meeting, issues of seasonality, actual daily capacity, and certainty of achieving the savings were all brought up.
Yeah, and
That's what you're raising, you're
to
addressing.
your point, the achieving of the savings would be very critical, and something as important and as critical as drinking water and all that else that goes into a water system would be something that I'd hate to take a chance with. So thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Yep. It's a team effort tonight, Rich.
Rich Epstein, resident. So it sounded like there was a meeting that was public. Did I hear you right?
I did not say it was public. I said it was not confidential.
Oh, okay.
It was not a meeting to which the public was invited. It was a meeting that was convened by the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, and some of the attendees were not subject to the confidential agreements that others that were there were subject to.
Okay. And it sounds like there's a milestone tomorrow at noon. Will that information be public?
As I said, that information will then be discussed in a confidential meeting on Friday afternoon.
Okay. And I'll just, a thought on the previous conversation. One of the things going to all the Colby Sawyer meetings, and we all support the school tremendously. And my understanding, one of their goals is trying to get back to a higher student population that, they used to have many more students. So even if conservation mechanisms are successful, if they're successful at getting more students, that will counteract the conservation measures. I just want to add that comment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ken, Rip, do either one of you want to say anything? No, thank you. Am I doing okay? you haven't said anything to do with this? Was it different than what we're allowed to say? Okay. All right. Any other discussion you want to have about water while we're here tonight? That's all. I think that's all there is to say about the meeting with DES. It's I think you know that we met at our last meeting with the water precinct. We met with DES. I met with DES. We continue to water conservation. Water issues are very high on the list of things that we have been dealing with for quite some time right now, and I appreciate the water commissioners coming tonight, even though they've probably, I haven't told them anything they didn't already know, because we were in the same meeting. Okay, no more conversations about water tonight. All right, 6:26. Either one of you want to talk about water tonight? What? But Karen, you do want to talk again. Darn it.
I actually hate coming up to the podium for it, so 2 times in one night's kind of a stretch for me. And it's not about water, so I don't want to jump ahead on anything. It has to do with the previous topic, and I just wasn't able to collect my thoughts in time to raise my hand, so
Okay,
if that's
go for it.
okay. I just wanted to ask, with regard to the dispatch, what was the agreement tonight? I guess I'm not clear what the result of the discussion was.
To revisit the idea of conducting a survey of dispatch, but I would just like to postpone the conversation to fiscal year '26, when we will have a new town administrator and we will have a new select board member, to include them in that conversation. But I would support a study being done on dispatch in light of this project of the new police facility.
So there's not an agreement right now to do another study of
No.
dispatch, but the next step is...
Just postponing it.
Postponing the
Yeah.
discussion about doing another study of dispatch.
Yes.
All right, and you are in favor of that?
Yep.
And so would this be, so this would be the decision of the new Board of Selectmen?
Yes.
Does Janet, I'm just curious, Janet, do you have a view on that yet, or just in terms of, are you inclined to agree with BB, or
I
what's
think
your
I
thought?
said,
Yeah,
when,
she
I wasn't
I said
sure, that's
earlier
why-
that, yeah, that
I
I
wasn't
think if
sure.
we're going to build a new police station, we need to know whether we should include
Got it.
dispatch in that building. So yes, I am in favor of a review of the dispatch.
Okay, thank you very much. I was just wanted to have clarification. I was trying to just connect all the dots, so thank you very much.
Thanks, Karen.
you.
Anybody else? Okay, so this is going to be the end of this meeting. Tomorrow night, just to make sure everybody knows what's happening tomorrow night, is we are having what will probably be a fairly extended discussion about what's going on with the sewer situation up at, a septic situation up at Mount Sunapee, and to try to support our fellow towns that are around Lake Sunapee on that. We will hear from the town administrator about her future plans. We will be talking about finalizing any changes to the town's the selectmen's budget prior to the budget committee budget hearing on the 5th of February. And then we'll have our normal reports from committees and so on. So that's what we will continue with tomorrow night. That I would expect that we have a couple of routine items. I expect that the discussion with the general manager of the Mount Sunapee ski area might go on for quite some while, which is why we chose to have break this meeting into 2 parts, so that this important discussion about police activity could occur without people being tired and squirming in their chairs and so on. So with that said, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.